Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you to the Office of Corporate Relations Technology Executives Lecture Series. Our speaker today is Professor Klaus Weyrich of Siemens, and his topic is Innovation Management at Siemens AG. Professor Weyrich began his distinguished career with Siemens in 1969 in the research laboratories in Munich. He became head of the Luminescence Components Laboratory in the Semiconductor Department in 1973 and headed various Siemens AG research laboratories and units from 1973 until 1994. In 1994, Professor Weyrich became the head of Research and Development Technology, a position he held for 2 years. He was named head of corporate technology in 1996. The same year, he became a member of the Siemens AG Managing Board, the position he currently holds. In addition to his professional work, Professor Weyrich is an honorary professor at Munich University and a member of the German Supervisory Board for Heraeus Holding in Germany. As you know, his abstract is printed on the back of the posters. There will be about a 40-minute talk with time for questions and answers and a slight reception to follow. Thank you very much for attending.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thank you, Elaine, for your kind introduction. So can you hear me? Is the phone switched on? No, not yet. So I've done all what I can do. It's on here. To switch it off and on again, this sometimes helps. Okay, so hopefully you can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, good afternoon, and thank you very much for your kind introduction. So I'm happy to be with you. I feel deeply honored to talk here at MIT on innovation, to be precise, on innovation management at Siemens. And let me state, of course, that I'm aware that talking on innovation at MIT, that is like preaching to the choir. Nevertheless, because the topic is very complex, and nevertheless, I will try to do my best. Now it comes, and beside this, I'm looking forward for an interesting discussion. Now, first, Siemens has been always committed to innovation from its beginning. So the company was founded 156 years ago with the first, as a first product, the pointer telegraph. And today we would say this was a typical one of those garage companies, a typical startup company. But at this time there was no venture capital available, and there were no cars, and there were no garages. Nevertheless, the company started this product very successfully, and in the upcoming years it has been growing always through innovations. Many of them have become indeed milestones in the history of electrical engineering and electronics, like the first electric railway, the first dynamo. But in former times, just to mention, it's the high purity silicon, which was developed in '53, and today still 80% of semiconductor grade silicon is being produced along with the Siemens processes. The patents, however, already expired, and in the last years, just to mention the Piezo injector for the diesel injection, or the fingertip sensors, and other examples. So today we are number 3 in the world of electrical engineering and electronics, following General Electric and IBM, with the total sales of 74.2 billion euros. This was in year 2003. By the way, 25 years ago we were number 7. And what should be mentioned in this ranking of the top 10 electrical engineering and electronic companies is that Siemens is the only European company. And there, for the first time, we have with Samsung, a Korean company, which was getting into this top 10 list of companies. So what's unique with Siemens, on the one hand, of course, that we are mainly engaged in the field of electrical capital goods. But another thing what is special for Siemens is its high degree of internationality. Indeed, we have presence in more than 190 countries, and there's told that only few organizations are more international like us, for instance, Coca-Cola or the Federal Association for Football. But the internationality of Siemens, of course, is a result of its long history, and it's indeed one of the big assets of our company. The other specialty is that the scope of businesses of Siemens is very large. Indeed, it covers almost all aspects of electrical engineering and electronics. So this shows the sales. The size of the bubble is proportional to the sales. The biggest business segment is information and communications, close to 30%. Automation and control, that is close to 25%. Power, it's lighting, transportation, which is railway transportation, as well as automotive electronics and the field of medical. And as indicated on this slide, we do not want just to be the sum of all these bubbles, of all these business segments, but by internal networking on all aspects, in all aspects, we want to create synergies. Synergies, for instance, in the field of sales, synergies in the field of manufacturing, synergies in the field of technologies, and of course in research and development, for the benefit, of course, of our customers, because this enables us to create cross-disciplinary or joint competence solutions. In research and development, we also have wide worldwide activities. So this shows the major development sites with approximately more than 100 people on each site, and you can see the concentration which is in Europe, the concentration which is on the North American market, and upcoming concentration also in the Southeast Asian market. The R&D people altogether are around 50,000 worldwide, and the R&D expenditures exceeded in last fiscal year 5 billion euros. This corresponds to 6.8% of the sales. And according to the very decentralized structure of the company, 95% of this is being expended in the groups, in the regional units, in subsidiaries and associated companies, and this is rather for development of product systems and manufacturing process. And 5%, this is on a corporate level. This is for corporate technology in Germany, Siemens Corporate Research here in the United States, Ruckmanner Research Limited in UK, and that is mainly for the R&D, that means for research, for technology development and consulting. This shows the split of the R&D expenditures. More than 50% is for information and communication and automation. And from this, you can easily figure out what's the dominating technology in our company. It is software which has penetrated all businesses, not only the switch or the mobile phones. Mobile phone of today has something like 5 to 6 million lines of code. This corresponds to the complexity of the early space programs. And no doubt also the industrial automation is full of software, power control, the automotive electronics, the engine control, navigation systems, the medical imaging. So we can really say that everywhere we have software, and if the product itself does not contain software, then we need a lot of software to develop it. And indeed, worldwide, we have more than 30,000 software developers. And by this, we are maybe one of the biggest software companies in the world. We are, however, not recognized to be a software company. And the reason for this is that the software, our software, is the so-called embedded software. It's part of our products and part of our systems. So after this short introduction on the company, I'd like to talk a little bit about on our innovation strategy, making also some general remarks on innovation. Then talking on trend setting, which is our major innovation strategy, and I'd like to describing the success factors, and I'd like to make a concluding remark on the global dimension on innovation. So a few remarks on innovation. and I'm sure that some of those facts, of course, are best known for you, but maybe not in this form of presentation. The first statement I'd like to make is that innovation, productivity, and growth are closely interlinked. And to explain this, let's have a look on this left-hand side. This is a company which is apparently profitable, but not profitable enough. So the reaction would be to tidy up the product portfolio, to optimize the processes, to reduce the complexity of the products, to introduce design to cost. And you might end up with a lower cost position and a better profit situation, profit position. But this restructuring process being continuously done would simply lead to a shrinking of the company, despite the fact that it might become more profitable. So we have to find a counter process, which is growth, expansion of current businesses, new products, new applications, and new services. And you might end up after a certain period of time with the same cost level, but with a better profit position. And so that is the goal. First of all, of course, I'd like to state it never goes down and up this way. So this is following in incremental steps, and that's what we call continuous renewal. Secondly, I'd like to state that innovation is not only taking place in the growth branch of this process, but also in the restructuring. Here we have rather the process innovations, and here we have more the product innovations. And in some, they lead, of course, to an increase of the productivity. The third statement I'd like to make is, and this is an empirical experience, that the deeper the V, apparently these are the innovation champions. So those companies which learn how to restructure very effectively, so create or generate apparently a type of culture, a type of atmosphere which is very fertile, which is very useful for innovation. Segmenting the sales position into so-called old products, which are older than 5 years, and younger products, new products younger than 5 years. After a 5 years period, we have all the old products disappeared. The new products have become old product. And this, if in fact, is the demand for innovation, which is tremendous in our industry, because this, after 5 years, represents about 75% of our sales with new products. So apparently to manage this, that is the main task. And you all know that there are different ways of how to classify innovations into breakthrough and basic and fundamental and application. So I personally like this presentation, which positions innovation in between the more evolutionary and the more revolutionary way, describing that here the features is rather extrapolation, and it's here rather the discontinuity. Here the technical progress is incremental, the time horizon is short, few technical solutions, small risk, existing market, good planability. And here we have quite the opposite, the technical process. This, however, it's always written in literature, it's a quantum leap. So my background is physics, and all what I know is the quantum leap is the smallest leap you can do, which is allowed by nature. But here what the understanding is that this is a big leap. Anyway. Time horizon is long, many technical solutions, high risk, and the market is new. It has to be anticipated, and the planability is bad. And complementary are also the success factor. Here we have quality of planning, time to market, project management, clear strategic directions. And here we are talking on soft facts like visions, patience, intuition, and the comprehensive view. This is the work, what I'd like to say, the continuous renewal, which is the homework for all the companies. This is the part what all people are a little bit afraid of those discontinuities. And I'd like to state that these discontinuities do not affect only technologies. The typical example is in the field of information technology, when we went from proprietary network standard to the open internet protocol, for instance, or from the mainframe computers to the personal computers. It resulted in a change in the industry from vertical to horizontal structure, or completely new business models like the Amazon.com. And apparently what is the background of this type of changes is that those visionaries did overcome the traditional ways of thinking with respect to the customer requirements and the business boundaries. That means they did just leave this castle of thinking and jumped outside to look on this from the outside. And apparently many of those changes were effective by the outsiders. And in context or in connection with this, there's also the word bench breaking on top or in addition to benchmarking, which is no doubt a very useful tool and which is a must. But sometimes bench breaking, that means make it differently and not just better, can be the better strategy. And another experience is that the visionary, the innovator, and the market leader, that is rare in one person. So this was the case with Thomas Alva Edison and maybe with Werner von Siemens, but in former times I did not find many examples of that. And in this context, there is the famous book of Christensen on the innovator's dilemma, describing the fact that the launch strategy and the launch time are decisive for the product, for the success of new technology. He described this with the help of the hard disk drives, where this one generation being substituted by the new one, and which were different in the diameter of the disk itself, but of course a lot of other things on top of this. And the main lessons learned were that it's maybe not the most important to be the very fastest on the market, but it's decisive to make the correct anticipation of the product, of the customer, and of the market requirements. That is decisive. And in connection with this process, mainly big companies face a large danger or large dilemma. This is the cannibalization of the successful own businesses. And all what we can say, if you do not cannibalize your own business, then others will do it for you. Then another experience is the old technologies are fighting back, and out of this, the lesson learned is if you have a new technology, you should attack via a new application, not starting a direct attack on the established technology. And there are a lot of good examples in the history. The most prominent, no doubt, being the cathode ray tube and the liquid crystal displays. So the liquid crystal displays, which have now reached that they can, in size and in performance, compete with the cathode ray tube. But they did not start a direct attack on the cathode ray tubes in the 70s, but starting with wristwatches, pocket calculators, pocket TV, and similar things. But I'd like to say also that due to the pressure of the liquid crystal, the producers of cathode ray tubes significantly improved also their products and their performance of their products. Now, talking on dilemmas, I personally do not feel that it's justified to talk on dilemmas only in connection with new products. So I'd like also, I positioned also the word that the evolution has also dilemma. That you have a permanent fight for competitiveness in time, in costs and performance. And looking on two typical evolutionary developments in more detail, this is the example of the DRAM, and everybody's aware of Moore's law. But looking in detail with the 256K or the 1 megabit, at least the latest, we switched over from NMOS to CMOS technology. With the 4 megabit DRAM, we had the trench technology. With the 16 or 64, the chemomechanical polishing came up. Then the deep UV lithography or phase shift mask, and now we are beyond the 1 gigabit. We have to look, or we are looking for new dielectrics. And the other example is the computer tomography devices. So this was one of the very first ones in '74. You can see how the quality has improved by many, many improvements based on the algorithmic sides, based on the detector side, and many other things. So what we can learn from this is, first of all, evolution, it's always at the limits of the technological possibilities, and that makes it difficult. And then the second statement is evolution might look like an evolution from the outside. But if you look deeper into the whole thing, you will find that there's a lot of hidden revolutions because each of these steps by itself represents a revolution within this technology. So what we can learn from this, apparently innovation independent on whether it's revolutionary or evolutionary, it's always difficult, it's hard work. And that means that the strategy will become, or to find the right strategy is maybe the most important thing. So any innovation strategy has to be part of the business strategy. So when you have found the business strategy, this fixes the innovation strategy, and out of the innovation strategy, you should develop your technology strategy, and from that, the R&D strategy, where to place the resources. It's mainly a top-down process. However, I have to say, for brand new things, of course, it can go the other way around, in a way that some new results out of R&D can finally define business strategy. So here on the left-hand side, it's the technology, which is like a two-sided coin. The innovation side is where you convert knowledge to money. That shows towards business. The R&D side, that's where you convert money to knowledge. This is rather towards scientific disciplines. And this reflects also the main difference between R&D and innovation. So R&D is when you convert money to knowledge, and innovation is if you do the conversion of knowledge to money. So this is in connection with the innovation strategies, one statement I'd like to make. Secondly, looking on the most prominent innovation strategies, I would say there are basically three ones which I'd like to position along the typical S-curve of technology, which shows the maturity of the technology over the time. Everything starts with a new technology, which might represent a discontinuity, which sets up new rules of the game. Then when the slope starts to increase, then we are talking on pace-setting technologies, because they determine tomorrow's competitiveness. The key technologies determine today's competitiveness. And when things are getting saturated, then we are talking on basic technologies, which represents the basic competence of today's business. This, by the way, is the segmentation we in Siemens classify our technologies according to the attribution of the business. And the three main innovation technologies are, the one is the first mover, who is concentrating on these new technologies, on these base technologies. Of course, he has also some insight into the key technologies, and you all know this American saying is that the early bird gets the worm. So we in Germany, we have another saying, that is the early potatoes get the highest prices, or those which you get in a very early stage. So this is the first mover. The second strategy is that one of a fast follower, which is concentrating mainly on the key technologies, on the basic technologies. Of course, he has also some knowledge on the pace-setting technologies, but his philosophy is to win the race, not by leadership in technology, but by putting his core competencies on other fields, like logistics, for instance. And there's also a saying for this is that the early bird might get the worm, but the second mouse gets the cheese. This is from Garrison Keillor. Well, the third innovation strategy is that one of what we call to be a trendsetter. A trendsetter who is focusing his main attention to the part of the technological S-curve where you will find the highest dynamics. So he controls, he's a player on the market, he's the player in terms of technology, and of course he has also access to the new ones and a good knowledge on the basic technologies. And here again, I put the statement, if you're in control of the wormholes and the mousetraps, then you get both the worms and the cheese. And this apparently in times where in our branch, where time is the decisive factor, represents the most attractive innovation strategy. But the third statement I'd like to make is a look on the technological competence or technological strength is not enough. To be successful in innovation, the position in technology to some extent might fix, let's say, the basic innovation strategy, but you have to adjust your R&D resources, your patent strategy, standards, processes also. Along with this basic philosophy, I do not want to go into detail with all those aspects here. The trendsetter, he has the market power, the technology power, so he strongly links R&D and technology and innovation strategy to the business strategy. He has a strong patent portfolio, and he's always strong enough to enter cross-license agreements, and he controls at least the de facto standardization process. The first mover, he has the basic patents. He tries to make a solo attempt or to form strategic alliances. He focuses more on the very new things, on the creative R&D. And the fast follower, as I said, he is looking more on the efficiency, make or buy decision. He orientates himself on the cost trendsetters. He looks on cost leadership. He has maybe profitable enough to enter cross-license agreements with compensation, and he relies on existing standards. Despite the fact that this is a very, let's say, schematic and crude picture, the main message is if you develop an innovation strategy, it has to be consistent in all these aspects. And the consistency of the innovation strategy indeed is what's the most important. And from this, of course, you can figure out what we decided for us to be our innovation strategy. And that is this one of a trendsetter in our businesses. And of course, having a broad scope of businesses, as I have described before, it's hard to find, let's say, all the things which are in common. Nevertheless, I tried it, and I'd like to focus here on 7 points which are important if you want to follow this strategy to be a trendsetter. First of all, you need comprehensive visions on where your businesses are going. Secondly, you cannot be present in all technologies, but you should be in a leadership position, at least in those technologies which are strategically important. Any technological strength does not help too much if you have not protected this via intellectual properties, so you need a strong patent portfolio. It's the optimum use of synergy, especially for a company with a broad scope of businesses like we are. It's the fifth element, it's optimizing all the processes involved in the innovation, the R&D presence in the lead markets, and finally, and last but not least, of course, it's the excellence of the people. And I'd like to go through these 7 elements, and let me start with the visions. Niels Bohr, the famous physicist, Nobel Prize in Physics in 1922, made this statement. A similar statement was made by Mark Twain, I have heard. That prediction is difficult, especially if it concerns the future. And indeed, Niels Bohr was correct. I'm sure that all of you know many people who are, let's say, champions in the other way around. That means a prediction is easy if it concerns the past. So people which can explain everything which happened in the past. But indeed, that is not the challenge here. There are also people which say that looking into the future, making those predictions should not be done because of 2 simple reasons. First, everything is too complex. And secondly, they say the boundary conditions are changing too rapidly. And I'd like to contradict a little bit in saying, first of all, any planning is better than no planning. Secondly, it's maybe not the result what is important. That means that we precisely know, or that we precisely insist in knowing what will be happening in the year 2020. What's important here is the process. The process in developing those visions and not doing this once in a decade, but having this as a continuous process, because then you develop this agility to react on all changes of boundary conditions. And that is the part we are focusing on. In German there's a saying, apparently here the process is the way and maybe not so much the result of the process. Looking into the future, there are three major methods. One is, and everybody's aware of this, is the Delphi analysis. And the Delphi analysis, no doubt, which starts with a set of theses, and they are offered to a large number of experts, like 1,500, and then you get the feedback, and then the feedback is iterated several times, and then you end up with, let's say, a statement or a thesis where you can be sure that most of the experts are standing behind it. The Delphi analysis, no doubt, is a very visionary approach. And the drawback, and it includes the opinion of many, many experts, the disadvantage, however, is that it represents a time shot where look from today to the future, and it does not show up any way of migration, how to reach this future out of today's business. And this is simply due to the fact that those experts in many times don't have enough knowledge on today's businesses, on today's market mechanisms. So the other two methods, and that's what we are relying on, is, and of course we are looking very carefully on what the Delphi analyst says, but we are concentrating from a planning point of view on two methods, which is extrapolation and retropolation. And extrapolation is simply if you take today's business and you extrapolate, and the road mapping is the tool to do this, today's products, technologies, and customer requirements to the future over a short, medium, and long-term view, and of course the time horizon varies significantly with the different business segments. So this is a typical roadmap shown here for technology, sensors, and actuators. This is a quite old one, and let me state at this point, it's sometimes interesting to look on those old roadmaps and see what did everything happen like we predicted it at this time. And the experience I made is they are never correct. And surprisingly, some of the things came much faster and others took much longer time. So, but it's not that they exactly fit what we anticipated, let's say in the year 94. Well, the advantage of the road mapping, no doubt, is that you have a very useful tool which covers the time scale, the segmentation of the products, of the technologies, and you have also some visionary goal, and it helps you in conducting a very comprehensive dialogue. However, the disadvantage is that since you follow ways of thinking which have been established today, you simply follow always the same way and the same road, and you might disregard what's happening on the right hand, on the left hand side. And secondly, as you all are aware, these are not expressways. Technology is difficult. You have sometimes roadblocks which have to be anticipated and which have to be circumvented. So apparently, despite the fact that road mapping is a very useful tool, it has to be complemented by another process, what we call strategic visioning, in developing scenarios for all our business segments, long-term scenarios in the future, and taking into account all factors of influence, which are above all the needs of the individual, societal aspects, the politics, economical aspects, the environmental aspects, of course, looking on technological aspects, customers and competition. And then we go the other way around, that out of these scenarios, we try to anticipate new markets, new customer requirements, new technologies, and new businesses. And then, and this is maybe what we are doing as the only one in our industry, we try to match these two views. Matching the extrapolation and the retropolation in finding where are the ways from today's to tomorrow, or the ways from tomorrow to today, where do those ways match each other, and we describe the synthesis of these process to be the pictures of the future of our business segments, which represent, as is shown here on the bottom line, a combination of extrapolation and retropolation. And indeed, the result of this process is a very comprehensive and a very detailed and huge data and information basis describing all important aspects like socio-economic trends of society, life of work, which are the main market trends in terms of size, growth, the structure of the market, the geographical distribution, the customer business trends, how do the value chains develop or the value networks develop, the company structures and the other processes. And then, of course, we are looking on technological trends, their strategic importance, the multiple impact technologies and those which are disruptive. And what you can see here is simply the cover pages of those pictures of the future for information, communication, transportation, medical lighting, automation, control and power. And what can be seen easily that everything is networked, and that means that the information technologies play a decisive role in all these businesses. When I ask myself, can I summarize what comes out of this? This, of course, is something hard to do, but nevertheless, I try to do it, and I'm sure that it will not bring you anything brand new. But nevertheless, I'd like to state there's a certain philosophy behind it. First of all, I feel that everything in any product, any service, any type of system, any other type of innovation is getting more and more complex in a way that it all get the character to be systems. And those systems are built up by technologies which are rather related by software, are rather influenced by software, and those which are rather influenced by new materials. And the main technological trends in building up those systems are that, first of all, that software substitutes more and more hardware. We have an increasing complexity. To afford the complexity, we decentralized intelligence. That is the normal way. Integration and miniaturization playing an important role, virtualization, individualization, modularization, standardization, and sustainability. And these are the 10 elements which influence the building up of those systems. And within this scope, you can find a lot of technologies, and you can list up here maybe hundreds of technologies or maybe 10 or 20, whatever you want. So I give just a few examples from system architecture, knowledge discovery, simulation, image and speech processing, grid computing, neuro or bioinformatics, and out of the materials, the nanomaterials, the functional materials, lightwave materials, intelligent displays, nanoelectronics, pervasive computing, and so on. And each of these technologies does not stand by itself, but it contributes to building up new and innovative systems. The core competence in the future, and this is my main message, will be rather interdisciplinary research between these technologies which are here. And of course, in this connection, knowledge management will play a decisive role in the company. Two examples of this interdisciplinary research. This is a piezoelectric injection valve, which we put on the market first. We were in the 80s a newcomer in the market of automotive electronics. We did not have an experience in the diesel. But when the common rail technology came up, we tried, of course, to become a leader with a new technology. And the idea of the new technology is that we replaced the electromagnetic valve, which is part of the commonly used injection valves, by a piezoelectric actuator, which is much faster than the electromagnetic valve. And this allows us to inject the fuel the diesel in small doses to run a profile which at the end results in less fuel consumption, in less emission and in less noise. And we put this system on the market. Up to now we already produced 5 million of these valves. And it's also the technology of choice for the future direct lean gas engines. And it's a typical example for interdisciplinary research because it was not only the actuator, but the whole system design, the simulation, mechatronics, all what has been included to realize this. And the second example is out of the medical solutions group, where we made a 16 detector array. By the way, at the last RSNA, we already presented the 64 one, but this was one we presented 2 years ago. Computer tomograph, which has a superior performance in terms of the detector array, but also in terms of the image processing. Which contains segmentation, modeling, classification, the dynamic analysis and the visualization. And what can be done is that having here a picture of a heart to have a look on a 3-dimensional basis. But what we can also do is to form a so-called virtual endoscope and to fly through, and that's the name given here, through the coronary arteries and to look from the inside what's happening there without any, as I said, mechanical introduction of an endoscope. And starting this, you can see how the heart can be, sorry, it's not 3-dimensional here, and you can see how the green point is propagating here through the arteries. And after a few seconds that you will see that in this artery apparently there's something which should not be there. These are the some calcifications as can be seen here, and this can be all pulled out of a very highly sophisticated data image processing. And I feel this is a good example for this type of interdisciplinary R&D. Next point are the patents. Patents which have become more and more a strategic weapon. So in the 80s, when the globalization was not took place only in a few parts of our industry, we had an inventor-oriented strategy of our patents. In the 90s, we became business-oriented, managing better the IP process, making use of licensing, also of non-core IP. But now we have the EVA-oriented patent processes, which take the patents as a corporate asset for the whole company, where you try to create intellectual properties on demand and where you make licensing as a business. So making this step by step increased, of course, the value of the patents. We started in 1995 with a so-called innovation initiative, which made also publicity to the inventors of the year. And when we started this innovation initiative in 1995, you can see that the patent publication of Siemens increased over the years, more than doubling within the 6 years which are shown here. You can see that, of course, our competitors to some extent try also to set up those patent initiatives. And I'd like to say, of course, also that the number of patent publications, that's not the whole story. The quality of the patents has to be important. A few words about synergy. To make use of synergy, of course, should lower the cost, could increase the speed, and could reduce the risk. And if I say could, I'd like to say that synergy, that is not a free lunch. It can be, synergies can be created in different aspects. One, as I said, is the patents when they are taken as a corporate asset. Common platforms, joint developments, multiple impact technologies, best practice sharing, or the management of knowledge, skills, and people. But you really have to balance synergy in a way that you get out the optimum out of it. Having a common platform or having a joint development or having joint competence innovations, of course, might result that you have to go into to take some compromises, and this is something you have to carefully balance. One of the most effective ways of creating synergy in our company was no doubt the best practice sharing in the field of software. So we started in 1995 a company-wide software initiative, which was split up into 20 group-specific software initiatives. And the motivation to start such a best practice sharing was that more than 60% of our sales heavily depends on software, and apparently excellence in terms of in software is a must for us. The benefits we got, and I could not put numbers here, but by internal benchmarking, was a significant decrease in cycle time, in development effort, and in the numbers of errors, or in other words, the increase of the quality. The fifth point are the processes. And there's no doubt that, and I'm sure you can gain most of the money if you have good processes, and on the other side, you can lose much of the money if you don't have the right processes. And the basic process of innovation, of course, is that you have to have the invention, the implementation within the company, and the implementation on the market. What's the issues here is the idea generation process, the idea selection, the IP generation. Here you have to develop the business plan, the financing, the project management, which is decisive, as I said, the logistics, the production, testing, integration, controlling, and here are the more market-related things, sales, after-sales services, and the right marketing philosophy, which, by the way, has to start much earlier than in the implementation of the market. What I want to say that you have to take the customer into your scope from the beginning. And that's the reason why I said any innovation process starts and ends with the customer. And many people, especially in the public discussion, believe that having the idea or having made the invention, that this is an innovation. The innovation is only when you have run through all phases and when you turn it into a profitable business. And in this context, I'd like to state what Thomas Alva Edison said, that innovation or genius, that is 1% inspiration and 90% perspiration. And that means that innovation, no doubt, is hard work. The sixth point is having an international network or R&D presence in the lead markets. I've shown you before that our R&D activities are really international, focusing on the three parts or the three elements of the triad, the North American market, the European market, and the Southeast Asian market. And one might ask, why do we internationalize R&D? And here are some reasons. One is being closer to the customer. And I feel that this is maybe one of the most striking arguments. Sometimes it's also good to be close to the production. One aspect is networking to the scientific community. That means allocated your R&D resources in those countries where you feel that you have the highest dynamics of technical progress. And this, of course, is important also in connection with the recruiting processes. To have an R&D presence is also an element of corporate citizenship. Cultural diversity, no doubt, is one thing which accelerates creativity and which accelerates the innovation process. And last but not least, of course, cost considerations must also be taken into account. But I'd like to say R&D will always grow in those places where we have businesses and where the markets are significant. And the strongest argument, as I said, is being a little bit closer to the customer. That brings me to the last point. The key and the key element for successful innovation is finally our people. People, as I said, in those multicultural aspects, working in interdisciplinary teams, in a multicultural atmosphere, committed to success. This, by the way, is a picture taken out of Siemens corporate research. They are not drinking coffee here, so they have a workshop, as you can see, outside the building. But this is, of course, not the typical way they have to work or they are working. So to be successful in innovation, that is hard work. As I said, it needs team spirit, it needs team efforts. And it's like being in a race where everybody has to contribute to be the most successful or maybe the fastest one. And I'd like to remind you what in Alice in Wonderland was saying. Alice was told you have to run as fast as you can in order not to fall back. But if you want to move forward, you have to run twice as fast. And these are the rules of our market. By the way, you can see from the picture from our researchers in Princeton, we have a nickname for this laboratory, which is the Little United Nations. So you will find all kind of nationalities and all kind of mentalities. So let me end with the last but one slide, saying one word about what I feel is the global dimension of innovation. So looking all around what we are faced with with aspects which are written in newspapers or what are discussed across the labs, we indeed are faced with a lot of global challenges like shortage of water, limited primary energy resources, the carbon dioxide problem, the population explosion, pollution, noise, individual mobility, traffic overload, intelligent, efficient lighting, IT penetration to all branches, to all sides of the economy, security aspects, the learning society, digital divide, teledoing, digital production, healthcare costs and demographic changes. And these are all topics being discussed very thoroughly and looking what can be solutions to them. For instance, the hydrogen-based economy or the decentralized energy supply, the global link, solid-state lamps, flexible paper displays or e-paper, emission reduction, fuel cell vehicles, mobile business, human-computer cooperation, the senior home, preventive medicine, minimal invasive therapy, fractal production, virtual engineering, totally integrated automation. So these are some of the solutions possible here. And I'd like to, or I ask myself, what does those solutions have in common? First of all, I'm convinced they all require interdisciplinary work between technologies, between different businesses to join competences. Secondly, I'd like to state that many of them will not be realized according to the technological feasibility or possibilities, but rather what will be economically affordable. So we have to carefully watch what from this side can be realized and what not. Third statement I'd like to make, that the realization of many of those solutions will require a strong consensus between industry, science, politics and society. And last statement I'd like to make is, and that of course is a good part, a good statement is that electrical engineering and electronics will play a decisive roles. And now you will understand why I depicted those examples in that way, because this exactly covers our business segments where Siemens is active. And the last slide I'd like to show, this is a statement of our CEO, Dr. Van Pira, who said the best way to predicting the future is to invent and predicting the future is to invent and to shape it yourself. And that's maybe in a nutshell what we do understand under the word of trend setting. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much for a very inspiring talk, and there's time for questions from the audience. There are microphones if you'd like to go on.
There were so many R&D sites of Siemens around the world, right? So I was just wondering, like with the giant Siemens is, how are the processes, like what exactly are the structural processes to make sure that all the R&D that is done reaches the decision-making level in time so that Siemens does not miss on any opportunity?
Sorry, I didn't get the
Siemens has a lot of R&D sites, like there were almost 100 on the map, if I counted them.
So these are the larger ones. There's a lot of smaller ones which were not indicated on this map.
Yes, and there's always a tension between like operations of a big organization and entrepreneurial and innovative spirit. So my question to you is, what is exactly like the structural structures imposed in the company like Siemens, so that these innovations that take place in all these R&D centers make way to the decision level place, so that when they can be implemented and marketed on time?
So first of all, each of those development sites, of course, belongs to one of our business groups. And so they are then strategically conducted or strategically driven by those business groups. So the picture might look like a little bit a chaos, and your question is, how is this being managed? All what I can say, 7 business segments, 13 business groups. Out of the 13 business groups, we have something like 90 business units, and they are subdivided into so-called business fields, and that's the way it goes.
And what is the average time the innovation makes it to market?
The average time to market something, well, this is in a business where we have selling, for instance, power plants, or on the one hand, and maybe the product with the shortest innovation cycle is a mobile phone like this one, where it's maybe 6 months or something like this, and in other fields it can be several years. So the businesses are very different, and if I give you an average number, it wouldn't make too much sense.
Is there another question?
It's a very interesting presentation, but I'm wondering if Siemens were an American company, I would guess it would have an entirely different innovation strategy, and I wondered whether, to what extent, the innovation strategy of Siemens works because it is a German company where you have a cooperative climate, a social climate, stability, as opposed to an American climate, I think, where you have a hit and run or dog eat dog, or much more adversarial environment, and companies don't, except for a few like General Electric, and I'm wondering, and I think that's, I have a lot of questions about that too in relation to Siemens. I think it operates entirely differently from Siemens. So I'm wondering, to what extent does the strategy reflect the German culture, and to what extent do you adapt that strategy, or can you adapt it when you operate in a different country like the United States?
Well, first of all, I don't think a difference of the attitude of how to work in the United States or how to work in Germany. Just to give you, sorry?
You're not worried about all those lawyers in the United States? We have 1 million lawyers. I think Germany has 20,000. Isn't litigation an entirely different?
Yeah, but look, we have something like 87% of our business outside Germany. Of course, the European market. So we have, of course, the headquarter in Germany, but from the number of employees point of view, it's less than 40%, which is in Germany. And from our businesses, it's less than 25%, which is in Germany. So you have to be international anyway. And I wouldn't, and also from the R&D people, about 50% is outside Germany. So we really have to deal with all those different rules in the different countries, and we want to be successful everywhere. Of course, we have to consider certain specialties on certain markets, but these 5 elements, or these 7 elements I described, I think they should always hold. By the way, you said that stability, and of course, no doubt, this is one of the, and the financial performance, one of the big advantages of our company. But the decision to be a trendsetter in the business is a little bit. If you had asked the people maybe 20 years before, they would rather say, well, Siemens starts second and finishes first. That was a typical philosophy at this time, which has been said to Siemens, which was, by the way, not wrong, and even not correct at this time. So this intention, or this that we are willing to be a trendsetter of business, this is really something we have developed in the last decade.
Another question? Last chance. One in the back.
I'm wondering if you could say anything about your vision, perhaps, or where you see innovation and business management
You mean the innovation in the business strategy itself?
Yeah.
Well, I can't formulate a precise vision. The only thing I'd like to say that due to the fact that the business processes are changing, and due to the technological possibilities, and due also to the fact that, for instance, the transportation and of goods and logistics, due to new technologies will change, we have to be very careful on what type of new business structures, value change, segmentation of value chains, and changes of the industrial structure will come up. And we have a good example right now, which we have seen in the last 2 to 3 years, that this was the breaking up in the value change in the field of telecommunications, as compared to, let's say, to 7 or 8 years ago. So this is the part I would not only look on visionary technologies, but also paying a lot of attention to non-technological things like businesses, processes, and structures of our industry.
Okay, thank you. One more question, yes.
I assume you've studied your competitors quite a bit. Would you care to contrast your approach to innovation with that of General Electric?
I wouldn't do it to compare it to one of our competitors. At the end of the day, everybody or all the companies which have a global business are our competitors, and we have to compete with each of them. So let me state that we rely on this being trendsetter, which is in quite, let's say, in accordance with the fact that you have to be number 1 or 2 or 3 in each business to be successful, and that is the correspondent part of the innovation strategy.
You talked about the complexity of and the interdisciplinary nature of the systems that you're dealing with right now, and you identified 2 issues: on the top, the IT issues, and on the bottom, the materials issues. Could you say something about how you view the importance of materials in these systems going forward from an innovative and strategic perspective?
Well, if I did understand you correctly, let me explain what I wanted to express with the example, for instance, of nanoelectronics or nanosystems. There's no doubt that you can make fascinating single devices out of nanotechnology. But on the other hand, what counts at the end of the day is that you have an increased system performance. So you have to include all these aspects, and the winner will be that one who really can combine the system requirements plus the new technological possibilities out of the nanotechnology. And my statement is the winner will be that one who have them both, not that one who have the fastest or the smallest or what else transistor.
Okay, thank you very much.